Hello and welcome everyone. I'd like to start out with a question. How many of you are in research or engineering? Could you raise your hand, please? Okay, so we have about 50-50. Have you ever been awake at night wondering if your design will work? I know that I have when I was a design engineer. There's a lot of unknowns that you have to worry about in your design. And experimental validation can be very hard. It can even be impossible in many cases in hydrogen technologies. So simulation can give you answers. And it can provide you insight into what is going on in your device. And it's this type of understanding that gives you confidence in your product and ultimately reduce your time to market. Now, hydrogen technology is such a vast field. I've divided it up into 3 categories here. So the production, the transportation and storage, and of course consumption. So where here do you think simulation is being applied right now? And the answer is everywhere. And what these processes have in common is their multi-physics nature. So that is to say, in order to accurately describe it, you have to involve multiple physics phenomena. Now consider, for example, storing hydrogen in a tank. You need to pressurize it, which means there is fluid flow. But when you compress a gas, you also need to include temperature effects. And then you also want to maintain the safety of the vessel itself, so you need to incorporate structural mechanics as well. So already you can see that a holistic approach is needed there. And the software that we supply, COMSOL Multiphysics, was built from the ground up to handle such real-world models. So going back to this hydrogen tank, let's say you start with a mechanical analysis. It's now very easy to add the gas dynamics to it, because the user interface is always the same. Now, in terms of hydrogen production, I've listed a couple of sample examples here. For example, steam methane reforming is still being used a lot, and the process is not without issues. So catalyst poisoning and deposition of carbon are issues that are being investigated. And simulation can then tell you that, and they can also give you insight into the gas flow, reaction rates, temperature, and this allows you to optimize the design. Solar is another one. In terms of a solar dish, you want to make sure that the radiation is uniform, because the hydrogen production efficiency is strongly related to the uniformity of the target. And you can use ray optics to optimize for that throughout the day as the sun moves, and also throughout the seasons. Now, one category that was missing, of course, in hydrogen production is electrolysis. This is a very popular topic. I'm sure you're aware of the 250 million euro subsidy from the Dutch government for electrolyzers. And we have models for the popular electrolyzer chemistries. So the alkaline, PEM, and the solid oxide electrolyzer. Now, in terms of storage, the metal hydride-based storage is one of the pillars here because it gives a very high energy density. And this makes it also suitable for example, vehicle applications. But then storage is also a big one. The previous speaker, Dennis, already spoke about salt caverns. There's a lot of research going into that. Saline aquifers is also a storage reservoir type that is being used a lot. And one of our customers here investigated the influence of the location of the injection site, because it turns out, of course, these are geographical formations, so they're highly irregular in shape. If it's a perfect sphere, then you know where to put the injection site, but here it's not so clear. And then you have to model the entire process throughout the year. So during springtime and summer, when you have excess electricity, you generate the hydrogen and store it. And then during fall and winter, you want to get it out again. And it turns out there is a more than 5%, it's about 5 to 10% difference, depending on where you put the injection site in these reservoirs. So that's very important research. Now, because hydrogen is such a small molecule, it diffuses through materials easily and it damages them over time. So hydrogen embrittlement is another one that is important to model to estimate the lifetime, for instance, of pipelines and the safety of pressure vessels. What I've also listed here are flow meters. This is one of the many topics that are important for storage as well. We have models for most of them. Then in terms of production, of course, you end up with fuel cells. We have models for the popular types of fuel cells. If you look at the efficiency of traditional combustion engines, then there is a thermodynamic limit to it. The interesting thing here is that for fuel cells, the theoretical maximum is almost 100%. Does anyone know what roughly the efficiency is of fuel cells that we have today? So this is between 40 and 60%. So it's pretty good, but there's still a way to go. And people use simulation here to get insight into the flow rates, the reaction rates, but also to answer questions about fuel cell poisoning. When does it occur? At what rate? Do the acids turn my hydrophobic surfaces hydrophilic? These affect your lifetime. People look into that. When it comes to the scales of fuel cell modeling, we cover all the scales. So at the unit cell scale, you look at a representative part of the geometry, and there you then model the electrolyte, and you can look at the shape of the current collectors, the gas diffusion layer. On bipolar plate scale, you can investigate the geometry to make sure that there's homogeneousness in the flow and temperature. You can also identify areas of starvation and underutilization. And then at the stack scale, you look at the flow throughout the stack, along the height of the stack, and you can do thermal system analysis as well. Now, an interesting example here is from Toyota. So they use our simulation software to accelerate the development of their fuel cells. In this case, the question was about the shape of the fuel cell flow plate. And it's not such an easy question. There's a lot of different geometries that you can look at. And of course, you can build 500 prototypes, but it takes a lot of time and it's very expensive. So what they did instead is they let our software optimize for a certain number of promising shapes and then make a limited number of prototypes. And based on that, they could see they had better uniformity in the flow as well as the reaction rate, and therefore also a higher power density in these fuel cells. Now, the reason people use our software a lot is because it's built on multiphysics. So this gives you two benefits. First of all, you can create any multiphysics coupling that you can think of. But it also means that the user environment is the same regardless of what type of analysis you're performing. So right now you see a ray optics analysis of a solar dish, but I can change this to an electrolyzer or to a hydrogen embrittlement model or to one of a fuel cell. And as you can see, the interface is always the same. So this makes it easy to learn about new physics, but it makes it also easy to exchange models with different departments, even with your customers. So I started with the question, where in the hydrogen value chain do you think simulation is being used? I hope I could give you a taste of that it's used everywhere. And the reason people use our software is because it gives you the full suite of functionality for any application here. Now, if you'd like to learn more about it, I have a stand at D06, which is in front of the hydrogen bar, very close. So if you have questions, then I'll be happy to discuss them there. Thank you.